Good evening, everybody. Welcome to another live episode of The Breakdown. It's November 16th, 2025. I'm your host, Nate Pike. It's been a little bit since we did one of these live broadcasts because we've been very, very busy. There's been so much going on, and there's so many important conversations that we've been having. If you missed our CMP episode, you should definitely go and check that one out. And boy, we have got, this episode obviously is going to be amazing. But we have an episode that we're going to be dropping on Wednesday that is so good, and it is so powerful, and it got me in the feels. So that's what I'll say about that. Keep your eye open for that on Wednesday. I'm not going to give anything away because it's timely and very, 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 very good. But let's get into all of the things that have been going on. We're not going to go back all the way back to the last time that we did a live show because we would be here forever. And I don't know that anybody wants that. But we are going to talk about the things that have happened over the last couple of few days. There's been a lot in the week. And we got to start with Remembrance Day, unfortunately. This picture here, it got a lot of attention. A lot of people wondering, what's the deal with that exactly? This is a cenotaph. It's a fairly common practice that a number of different organizations, political parties, businesses, community groups, all that kind of stuff, in all of their local communities, they will bring a wreath, and they will leave a wreath at the cenotaph to show respect, to show deference, appreciation for the sacrifices that veterans have made and continue to make in the service of our country. And apparently, some people like to use it as a marketing opportunity, which is very gross, I think. I think it's very gross. This picture got quite a bit of attention on the social medias because it has a very, very large, disproportionately large. It is larger than the diameter of the wreath by like half. United Conservatives placard on it, and a lot of people went, "Whoa! How tone deaf! How insensitive! How not reading the room do you have to be in order to consider putting something like that on?" And it didn't take very long before the answer revealed itself in a Facebook post by somebody who's been fairly active in Alberta politics for quite some time. This is a Facebook post by one Benita Peterson. And if you've been following not just the politics, but sort of the fringy politics, the Freedom Convoy, the standing outside of hospitals and harassing nurses as they were trying to leave their shifts during COVID, then you know exactly who Benita is, because she's that person, and she stayed very active in politics. Very recently, she made the news for getting a crosswalk, a pride crosswalk, rainbow crosswalk, banned in the town of Westlock. It's kind of her jam, punching down on the vulnerable and doing self-aggrandizing kind of things in particularly tone-deaf ways. Benita also is quite the event organizer. She's been an organizer off and on for TBA, Take Back Alberta, and the Take Back Alberta adjacent groups for quite some time. And she's got some thoughts about the separatism too, which is interesting, I guess, for somebody who has not had any public record of any sort of military service to on one day be talking about the importance of Alberta separating from Canada, and on the next day laying a self-aggrandizing wreath on a cenotaph. It seems a little dissonant. Benita also brought us the Tiki Torch marches. You may remember those, the Artur Pawlowski Tiki Torch marches that happened, that were an incredible dog whistle to hate crimes that happened in the United States. So that's who laid the wreath on the cenotaph. Mystery solved. So that's fun. Moving on from there. We got to talk about this bridge, because this is a I've been getting a lot of messages. There's been a lot of messages, and unfortunately, the last week was the week that Twitter decided to modify how messages work. So, I think I'm only seeing half of the messages that are showing up on my account, let alone the breakdown. Um, but getting a lot of messages about this. So let's do some context for what I'm going to talk about, because what I'm going to talk about is a protest that's been occurring in the mountainy area of Alberta. And it's been an ongoing problem. There's been some talk about it like it's a brand new thing, but it's really not a brand new thing. And as we see in Alberta all too often, it's one of those situations where it involves a company that then, through corporate stuffs, becomes a different company. And then the same kind of thing happens again. So that's fun. And to make a little bit of sense of this, what we're talking about is there's peaceful protesters who have established a peaceful blockade, and they built a wall. It's a wall made of trees and logs, and there's they've drilled some trout to it. And the reason why they've done this is because back in August of 2023, a company called the Spray Lakes Sawmills constructed an illegal bridge. So the bridge did not have any of the approvals. This is a picture of the illegal bridge that they just kind of dropped on top of the Highwood River. It didn't have environmental approval, and there was a lot of concerns that it caused some pretty severe environmental disruption. Now, this has some big impacts on the wildlife, particularly the fish that live in that area. Later that year, so the original company, Spray Lakes Sawmills, later that year, it was December, West Fraser Timber, which is a huge logging company, bought Spray Lake Sawmills and restarted the whole application process to put the bridge there. They now say that they have a permit that the protesters are claiming it was illegally obtained, and the protesters are blocking the road. I don't know what's going on in the foothills. It's wild. The amount of environmental stuffs that are happening in the foothills where companies come in and they go, "Oh, those are real nice rules. What about if we didn't maybe follow them?" And then people go, "Oh, I don't like that." And then they come back and they say, "Well, we'll follow the rules this time." And somehow get a second kick at the can because they changed ownership. Moving on from, before we do that, I wanted to give a little bit of context for what the space that we're talking about is. So it's a pretty big logging area that is going to be affected by this. And to give you an idea of where it is and why there's a lot of people who are saying, hey, this is important for the water supply, not just for the fish, but the water supply as well. It's not that far from Calgary. The pin that you see on your screen there, if you're watching, is the Lyneham Provincial Recreational Area, and it's just across the street, if you will, from there that this is happening. So it's not much farther south than Longview. It's not much farther west than Bragg Creek. So it's pretty close, and messing with the watershed is kind of a really big deal these days. So we wanted to talk about that, and hopefully, if the protest continues to go on, we're going to be able to find some time in the dumpster fire that is Alberta politics, where we don't have to focus on the violation and revocation of charter rights. We'll be able to talk about the protest, because I'd like to, but Alberta and much bigger fish to fry. My kids are going to hate me for that dad joke. Moving on from there, we got to talk about the ASIRT report that came out last week. This was finally delivered on November 6th, 2025. ASIRT is the body that's responsible for investigating when law enforcement does something badly or is accused of doing something badly. Well, they released their final report that summed up all of the things, all of the recommendations, all of the outcomes of their recommendations on November 6th. So last week. And this file, they do this all the time, where they'll be like, oh yeah, we looked into this, and oh, those cops shouldn't have done that, or oh no, the cops are fine. This one, not so good. Very high profile, because this is the investigation that was initiated because of the Lethbridge police harassment a former NDP MLA and minister, Shannon Phillips. It found, this is wild, as a result of ASIRT's investigations, there are reasonable grounds to believe that the criminal offenses, so these are criminal offenses, these aren't administrative offenses, criminal offenses of unauthorized use of computer and breach of trust were committed by SO, is the subject officer. So Subject Officer 3, Subject Officer 5, and Subject Officer 6. Accordingly, as required by the Police Act, these matters were referred to the Alberta Crown Prosecution Service, or ACPS, for an opinion on whether charges should be laid. So, quick recap on how the justice system kind of sort of works in the province of Alberta. Police do their investigation, and they go, that person did a bad thing they did. They should go to court. And there should be a trial, and we should have charges and justice for all. That's how it's supposed to work. So people, if somebody drives into my car, it's not me that presses charges. The police, if they determine that there was negligence, can say, we're going to recommend charges, or we're going to issue tickets and summons and citations and all of those things. But when it comes to criminal charges, it's the Crown that typically decides whether or not to press any charges. That's the Alberta Crown Prosecution Service. Well, what the report says is that, there were 3 cops. Definitely, it looks like they definitely broke the law. They committed crimes in the pursuit of apparently harassing, at the time, a sitting MLA and minister. What did the Crown Prosecution Service say? Well, they said maybe not so much with the charges. On December 8th, 2023, ASIRT received the requested opinion from ACPS, which recommended that no charges be laid. And there's an interesting little disclaimer that ASIRT threw in here. It is important to note that the ASIRT and ACPS are bound by different standards when assessing the viability of charges arising out of an investigation. ASIRT, as the investigative body, applies a criminal code standard that determines whether reasonable grounds exist to believe that an offense has been committed. ACPS, based on its internal policy regarding criminal prosecutions, applies a standard which examines whether there's a reasonable likelihood of conviction arising out of the evidence and whether it is in the public interest to proceed with a prosecution. As is evident in this case, the application of these 2 different standards to the same investigation will in some cases result in different conclusions regarding the same file. In this case, while ASIRT found reasonable grounds to believe an offense had been committed, for the reasons provided in their opinion, the ACPS did not recommend that charges be laid. But that is not the end of it, because Shannon Phillips is going ahead with a lawsuit that she launched. She launched back in 2022. So this has been going on for quite a while. She launched a lawsuit for $400,000. It's $300,000 and then 50 and then 50. She filed that lawsuit, and she's now said, now that ASIRT has said that these things happened with these 3 cops, and I believe in the original lawsuit, she actually only said that there were 2. So ASIRT found a bonus cop that was doing criminal things, which is bad. She's going to go ahead with a lawsuit. But then things got weird, really weird, because it's Alberta and it's politics, and this is the breakdown. So there's going to be a fun little twist. Kaycee Madu, there's a picture of him here from his Twitterverse. It's from when he got his King's Council, and he's wearing the fancy things. So he's very, very proud and posted that picture on the Twitterverse. It's a handsome picture. That's why we chose it. He put up a Facebook post. And in a Facebook post on November 12th, Kaycee referenced the fact that his deputy minister, as director of law enforcement, ordered 2 investigations into unauthorized access of private information on police databases by several Lethbridge Police Service officers. To quote the Facebook post, to unrelated previous decisions and the fact that I was our province's and nation's first Black Minister of Justice and Attorney General, certain leaders and interest group were not sure what to expect. Targeting me was their only choice of having dirt on me, their insurance policy, so to speak. The goal to undermine my role as AG, Attorney General, and make it untenable. To me, throughout the discussion into this matter, political staff was leaking, unknown to me. throughout the discussion on this matter, a political staff was leaking these developments. The nature of the discussions and decision points to his contacts at the police services. He goes on to talk about the dates, 2 specific dates when the investigations were launched at the behest of his deputy minister, which would have happened on his orders. There's no question. He was illegally and unlawfully traffic stopped and falsely accused of being on my phone. A criminal conspiracy that almost ruined my fledgling political career, reputation, and professional life. Now, there's a lot there. You can go back and pause on the Facebook thing, or it's actually still up on his Facebook profile and it's a public post. So if you want to go look at it yourself, you can. But there's a lot going on there, because in the Facebook post, it appears a reasonable person could interpret that Facebook post as saying that the whole reason why he got traffic stopped in the playground zone, allegedly while being on his phone, was because he had, that happened in Edmonton, because he had approved investigations through ASIRT into the Lethbridge police service. Do with that what you will. And at this point, it's probably worth remembering that these allegations did not go nowhere. They went some places. First of all, Kaycee Madu did pay the ticket. He paid the ticket for the thing. But there were some other things that happened in the process of all of this. And one of those was then Premier Jason Kenney asked the judge, hey, this is a bit of a goat show going on here. Is there any way that we can maybe get this sorted out? Because there's all these people saying all these things. It's a whole big story. Kaycee's very angry. Can we get to the bottom of this? And so a judge was found to do an investigation and to sort out what exactly had happened on that bright, sunny day. And there's some things that we're just going to take a quick sec to look at. So, in the judge's report, the constable, whose name was redacted in the public report, was parked in the southbound parking lane on Windermere Road at a place where there are 2 driving lanes and the parking lane. His truck was facing south. In his rearview mirror, he saw a blue F-150 approaching. He activated his radar unit and noted that the truck was not speeding. He said that in accordance with his practice, as the vehicle approached, he looked into the vehicle to note any possible infractions, including things like seatbelts or cell phones. When the 2 vehicles were side by side with the truck passing him, he noted that there was a dark-colored cell phone in the driver's hand. The driver had his left hand at the 9 o'clock position on the steering wheel and was holding the cell phone at approximately the 3 o'clock position. The screen was facing the driver, and the driver's face was to the right and looking down, implication being that it was looking at the phone. He was able to observe this for about 3 seconds. He decided to pull out and stop the vehicle. He attempted to move up beside the vehicle and get another look, but could not. He slowed, moved in behind the truck, and activated his lights and sirens. So that's the sworn testimony that the officer gave to the judge who did the investigation. But where it starts to get a little bit uncomfortable is how the traffic stop went. Again, from the report, Constable Renarana ran the plate number through his computer and noted that it was registered to the government of Alberta. He got out of his truck and walked to the driver's side of the blue truck. He advised the driver that he'd been stopped for a cell phone violation and asked for the driver's license and proof of insurance. The driver was not holding the cell phone and denied using it. He said that he was opening the console, and that is what the constable may have seen. He was moderately argumentative. The driver then asked whether the constable knew who he was. The driver said that he was the Minister of Justice and he would never do anything to break the law. He said that he was the Minister of Justice 3 or 4 times during the discussion at the window. He gave the constable his driver's license, but did not have his insurance documents. Don't you know who I am? And had it just been that, it probably would have just been cringy. Probably would have just been like, not everybody knows who everybody is in the zoo. It's not that big of a deal. Take a deep breath, relax, go about your day. But that's not where it ended, because Kaycee Madu then made a phone call to the Edmonton Chief of Police. Chief McPhee said that he received a text and then spoke with his acting Chief Operating Officer, Yinia O'Carey. I'm not doing a bit. who advised that the minister wanted to talk to him. The call is shown in the chief's logs at 9:42. It was interrupted by Minister Madu's call. The chief characterized the first couple of minutes as small talk. Then the minister started to talk about having just received a ticket for distracted driving in the school area. He seemed, quote, concerned and, quote, frustrated. He raised the issue of the Lethbridge police force and the possibility that there was racial profiling in relation to the ticket. The judge described the points that the minister was making at this point as jumbled, and the minister seemed working up. The chief responded by saying that he was not going to talk about the minister's traffic ticket. He said there were two choices: to pay it or go to court. He also said that no one was going to racially profile the minister over a traffic ticket. Chief McPhee said by the time the call had ended, the minister had calmed down. He said there was a marked difference in the minister's demeanor by the end of the call. The chief interpreted the marks made by the minister about Lethbridge and racial profiling as related to his receipt of a ticket. The minister never asked him to do anything with the ticket. So now we have the Minister of Justice. Well, we have the former chief of police of Edmonton. Don't worry, we're going to get to that in a second. But we have the Minister of Justice calling the then chief of police saying, hey, I got this ticket. Can we talk about this thing that I'm doing with Lethbridge and racial profiling? And the chief of police for Edmonton had to tell the Minister of Justice, I don't think that's why you got your ticket. And I'm not going to talk to you about the ticket. So you can pay it or whatever, man, but I don't want anything to do with this. Obviously, there's some heavy paraphrasing going on, but that's the crux of what was said. At the end of the report, the judge made some conclusions. Did Minister Madu interfere with the administration of justice? He did not. He was not successful. Did Minister Madu attempt to interfere with the administration of justice? He did. Is there reasonable perception that Minister Madu interfered with the administration of justice? Yes. So the final verdict of the report that the UCP commissioned to look into their own guy said, well, he tried to interfere in the administration of justice. He was not successful. And reasonable people would look at this situation and go, oh, he interfered in the administration of justice. He did. So it's very difficult to see how jumping onto the Shannon Phillips was harassed and stalked bandwagon serves any purpose. But there are some interesting little footnotes that are worth highlighting. One of them has to be where the two other figures who featured prominently in what we talked about landed, because the chief of police, Dale McPhee, is now the deputy minister of executive council. Effectively, he's Danielle Smith's top bureaucrat. And Yina O'Carey, I hope I got it closer that time. He is the deputy minister of communications and public engagement. So they both, I mean, there's all kinds of complex things in the background on that, but they both ended up inside of the UCP government. So Kaycee did not get reelected. Moving on from there. We got to talk about recall. It's the big conversation that's going on, one of them in the province of Alberta. And there's a lot of spin. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of disinformation. And there is some shenanigans going on that are not great with the spirit of democracy that we absolutely need to talk about. And if you're a fan of the show, they're probably coming from the side that you're expecting we're going to say. To start with, until a recall shows up on the Election Alberta website, it is not a go. It can be accepted. The initial paperwork can be approved, but it is not a go. Until Elections Alberta does all of the things, and they have provided the opportunities for the members that are the subject of the recall to provide their statement saying, but I don't want to go. It is not an officially approved recall right now in the province of Alberta. There are 2 recalls that have officially been approved. The first one everybody's well aware of, Demetrius Nicolaides in Calgary. There is There were 26,676 votes that were cast. The number of signatures required will be 16,006. And the deadline for that is January 21st, 2026. But there's a second one that has also been issued. That one is for Angela Pitt. She is the MLA for Airdrie East. There were a total of 24,688 votes cast. And in order to get her recalled and initiated by election, 14,813 signatures need to be collected. Now, that being said, there are a lot more in the works, a lot more in the works. There is a website that is tracking the various recall efforts. The accuracy seems pretty good, but remains to be fully tested. So do with the next little bit as what you will. According to the good folks at Operation Total Recall, there are 2 approved recalls, and there are another 14 that have submitted recall paperwork, and that initial paperwork has been approved. But as I said again, that doesn't mean that the recall is a go. Until Elections Alberta pulls the trigger and says, yeah, it's a go, it's not good to think of it as go. The other UCP MLAs. And I mean, it's a little fascinating. I have yet to identify any NDP MLAs that are targeted for recall. So, do with that what you will. Rajan Sani, Mohammed Yassin, Dale Nally, Miles McDougall, Rick McIver, which is a weird one because he's speaker now. So he doesn't really get a vote. Jason Steffen, Cyril Turton, Nolan Dick, Jacqueline Lovely, RJ Sigurdsson, Peter Singh, Rebecca Schultz, Adriana LaGrange, and Glenn Van Dyken. So there's a not small number of MLAs that are being targeted by these recalls. Now, that being said, getting to the point of collecting all of those signatures is a lot of work. It can only be done by the people who are in those constituencies. So there's some rules that have to be followed. And by all accounts, so far, heavy emphasis on so far, those rules have been followed. But it's worth remembering when recall was first introduced, going all the way back to March of 2022, Jason Kenney, they had a very big stance. They did a thing. They stood at a podium, and there's some familiar faces in that picture. There are. We promised to introduce a recall act to hold elected officials accountable between elections. We did what we said we'd do, passing the recall act into law next fall. Next week it comes into force. Promise made, promise kept. Jason Kenney's favorite tagline. And I love who's standing right beside him in the picture. There's old Calgary Bo. Demetrius Nicolaides right there, smiling away. And it's important to highlight that recall, especially within the more righty-right side of the UCP, has been something that has been supported. There's a lot of political scientists, political figures, smart people who are not big fans of recall. They do not believe that it is a good use of resources. And there are also concerns that it allows people to check out of the consequences of their vote. We can always recall them if we have to. Do with that what you will. Jason Kenney set a very, very high bar for that reason, because he didn't want people running in and saying, hey, we're just going to recall. We're going to recall everybody. Totally recall. Operationally, everybody. Jason Kenney did not want that. So he set the bar very high. Danielle SMith, in conjunction with her lowering the bar for referendum questions, lowered the bar for recalls. And as many people have said, she left a loaded gun in the middle of a field and said, but only we'll pick it up. And it turns out that apparently 16 constituencies that have UCP MLAs, they found the gun. They found it, and they want to use the metaphorical. It's metaphorical, to be clear. They want to use that metaphorical gun to maybe change some things. Violence is never condoned. It's a metaphor. Everybody calm down. And what were the thoughts on recall? If only there was some sort of record that we could look at with, I don't know, maybe the figurehead MLA and minister who's responsible for the book bans and negotiating with teachers. Maybe Demetrius has some historical thoughts on recall. Fortunately, he has not figured out how to delete his tweets yet. Going all the way back to 2015, regardless of the election, I'm speaking generally about recall. It should be available, no strings attached. In 2014, we should implement single member constituencies to strengthen MP accountability and implement recall right. 2015 again, regardless of political allegiances or ideology, recall should be legislated at all levels of government. Also in 2015, I prefer that recall is available regardless of the motivation, should be free and readily available. Those aged well. Because his position has changed by more than a little bit. He issued a letter after the recall was initiated, and his thoughts have perhaps evolved a little bit. I'm a firm believer in recall when used appropriately and for the right reasons. If a member has engaged in illegal or unethical conduct or demonstrably failed to perform the basic duties of their office, indeed, they should be recalled. If I've acted in an unethical manner or engaged in misconduct, I have no objections to recall against me. However, I believe I've always acted professionally, respectfully, and with your best interests at heart. I recognize that many of you did not support the UCP's priorities and policies in the last election, but I will always do my best to listen to your views and concerns with humility. I remain committed to the mandate you gave me, and I will always listen to different ideas to ensure that I'm in the best possible position to represent your views in the legislature. And the mandate language is... it's interesting. And the reason why it's interesting is because he did not win a sweeping mandate. He won. It was very, very close. So mandate, probably not the best word. But if the question is competence, I mean, the obvious joke that I could make right out of the gates is when he forgot to sign his book bans correctly. Because if you remember the initial book ban order that he signed, that he later had to rewrite because apparently he didn't know there were two meanings of the word graphic. He signed that one wrong. He signed the city and the date in the wrong places on the order. And then he had to go back and rewrite the entire order because it turns out as it was written, it banned thousands of classics. So some pretty low hanging fruit for competence stuffs. But fortunately, it's not the only thing to rely on. Because Demetrius Nicolaides also sent out an email, dear friends and neighbors. I'm writing to you today with an urgent request for help. As you may be aware, a politically motivated recall campaign has been launched against me. And can I just ask, what would be a non-politically motivated recall campaign? Like, at what point is somebody engaging in a political process for non-political reasons? I don't know. The recall has nothing to do about me, but instead is part of a coordinated attempt to topple our government. I was elected on a clear mandate, and the recall effort seeks to overturn the democratic decision made by the voters. I believe I've been an unwavering voice for our constituents, focusing tirelessly on getting results, not playing political games. Underage minors. The underage minors part wasn't in there. That was just me. We cannot allow this effort, supported by outside interests, to destabilize our community's representation and waste taxpayers' resources. I'm fighting back and I need your help immediately. Our defense depends on your direct involvement. The process to defeat this recall requires a swift, organized, and robust response, and we need to defend the mandate you gave. Our most critical needs: sign up to be a volunteer. This is the single most important and impactful action you can take right now. I urgently need committed volunteers to assist with essential organization efforts, including I want to read this whole paragraph again for emphasis that it's an entire paragraph. I urgently need committed volunteers to assist with essential organizational efforts, including crucial signature verification, data entry, and phone banking to rally support. Your time and energy are the most valuable resources in this fight. And a lot of people heard that, read it, and they went, what? What do you need volunteers for signature verification for, Demetrius? Because that's something that Elections Alberta does. It would be bad if the subject of a recall got to determine the validity of the signatures. That would be bad. Why are you telling people that that's what you want to do? And it didn't take very long. The excuses are just embarrassing because, according to a CBC report, his message to supporters asks for help with phoning constituents, data entry, and, quote, crucial signature verification. Signatures on a recall petition will be verified by Elections Alberta's officials rather than by allies of the recall campaign subject. Asked about this line Friday, Nicolaides said his team won't be verifying signatures. I think, quote, I think that was a typo, end quote. Now, I fight battles with the autocorrect on the daily. I do. The autocorrect will go in, you'll have a word, and you'll be so proud of how you chose that word, and then the autocorrect will come in and change it to something that was not what you wanted the word to be. That's a typo. Not putting the U in color because we're in Canada. That's a typo. Leaving out a letter, also a typo. Putting in an extra letter, that too can be a typo. A full sentence is not a typo. I mean, some might argue that signing a ministerial order incorrectly, you could call that perhaps a typo, except you were writing it so it would not be typed. Typo. And this is the problem. This is the fundamental problem, is that in a question of recall, one of the questions that that constituents should be able to ask and demand of the elected officials that they're attempting to recall is basic competence. And when we have the education minister, this is the guy who's responsible for the reading and the writing and the arithmetic for the kids in the province of Alberta, when he can't send an email without stepping on his own appendage, that does not scream competence. See, that was a typo. But of course, he is not the only MLA who is currently subject to an active approved recall. We also have to talk about Airdrie East MLA Angela Pitt, and she took a fascinating approach to responding to her recall. She also issued a letter to the residents of Airdrie East on her Legislative Assembly Alberta letterhead with all of the things and everything. She talks about the teachers. The notwithstanding clause. We didn't have a choice. Students left outside of school for too long. Remaining on strike would not have solved this matter. We had to do things. We're getting some schools in Airdrie, though. Everybody be happy. But it's the last couple of paragraphs that really kind of speak to the willingness to listen. The fact that this recall effort is being led by an individual who works as a high school principal within our community is extremely disappointing. Every Albertan has the right to express their views, but using... Oh, God. We just found another typo, kids. But every Albertan has the right to express their views, period. New sentence. But using a taxpayer-funded position of authority to advance politically motivated campaign raises concerns about the potential inappropriateness of said campaign. At its core, this effort isn't about accountability. It never was. It's about politics, plain and simple. So the argument that somebody in a taxpayer-funded position of authority should not be able to engage in politics stuff is fascinating and chilling, because anybody who works in the public sector according to Angela Pitt's reasoning, should not be allowed to be engaged in any sort of recall or political activism. And that's a little bit weird, because if we take a look at the rules for elected officials and their staff, and we're going to in just a little bit, if we take a look at all of those things and we say, are they allowed to do those things? The answer is yes, as long as they're not using their position to validate what they're doing. So there's nothing wrong with being a principal at a school, as long as you're not being like, I'm a principal at a school, and therefore everybody should listen to me. Those are two very different things. But there's other things that people have expressed some frustration with Angela Pitt about. The famous quote came from a reply to a Facebook comment, and it's turned into a bit of an internet meme. The quote from Angela Pitt, and here is the Facebook comment from which it came for: "You can't be compassionate if it's not sustainable." Because as everybody knows, compassion is all about the person showing the compassion. It's not about the person who needs the compassion. Anyways, she's up for recall. And in a fascinating twist, when we take a look at Operation Total Recall, there is a name that is not yet part of the active list, and that name is Tanya Furr. You might be wondering why I bring that up.
Hi, this is MLA Tanya Furr returning your call from the voicemail that you had left. There wasn't a name left on your voicemail, so I'm sorry I'm not addressing you by your name, but I wanted to let you know I did receive your voicemail and your feedback with respect to the teacher strike issue, and wanted you to know your feedback has been noted, and I will be sharing it accordingly at the caucus and cabinet tables. So thank you for reaching out and sharing your views on the matter. I appreciate it. Bye for now. Was that okay?
I think so. Did you hear Sean or Sean?
I thought I heard Sean. So just okay. In your notes, put kind of Sean, question mark. We don't know the address, claims he's one of ours. We left a voicemail.
Sorry, I'm trying to follow along, but what was the phone number that you just called?
403. It's in the attachment. 40. You can see it in the attachment. 40.
Okay, that's the one. Okay.
Yeah. 40.
Melissa, but yeah.
You bet. It said a Melissa. You're right. It said a Melissa, but the guy was a Sean something. So maybe it's under the Melissa's name. 403 claims he's one of ours. Didn't leave a name. Voicemail sounds like a Sean when we called him back. Left a message. All right. Go to this next motherfucker.
Hello, my name is Doug Furby, and my telephone number is 403.
So let's talk about that for just a quick set. Let's chat about that. That was a voicemail recording that was posted on the Substack of Doug Furby. It looks like today. And it is Angela Pitt. No, sorry, Tanya Furr. Angela Pitt is the compassion, only if you can. And Tanya Furr is the let's call those motherfuckers. Tanya Furr called the first person, didn't realize that she hung up her phone. Or sorry, didn't realize that she hadn't hung up her phone. So she called the first person, didn't realize that she hadn't hung up her phone, and kept talking to someone who is presumably an assistant, a constituency assistant. I don't know. And then hung up when she went to make the next phone call. And so the person who got the phone call, presumably Sean or Melissa, they then called Doug, whose phone number had been read in. Now, when Doug posted that audio on the Substacks, he did not, he edited out the phone numbers, which is obviously a very, very good thing. But a couple of pieces for a minister and an MLA, especially a minister representing marginalized and vulnerable people, as Tanya does, to be referring to the people that she's calling as one of ours. So we'll talk to the ones that are one of ours. We'll return those phone calls that are one of ours. That's a little not representative-y. Doesn't exactly fit with I'm here for everybody narrative that all of the people who are being recalled are now trying to spin. But to refer to the constituents that are asking for phone calls back as mother effers, I'm gonna try only drop two. Tanya first can count as a third because my parents sometimes listen to this podcast and they still scare me. So to refer to your constituents as that is not great. It's not a good look. It does not show respect for the electorate. It does not show a willing to listen. It almost suggests that the voicemails that she was leaving were entirely performative and in no way actually meant, which isn't great, you see. But that's not here nor there. CTV published a story earlier tonight where they said that Doug has forgiven her, and he feels badly that she gets mean voicemails too. So good for Doug taking the high road. That's how accountability works. When somebody does something that's horrifying, you have to be able to call them out. And when they go like, I'm legitimately sorry, assuming that she was, and she just wasn't reading off another phone script, you have to be able to be, okay, well, maybe do better next time. But getting back to the recall things, getting back to the misinformation and the disinformation, we saw Smith, the premier, back from sunny UAE. She's been doing some press conferences. And in one of the press conferences, she got asked about some statements that were made by Alberta Federation of Labor President Gil McGowan, because he announced that the AFL is going to be doing what they can to support recalls that have been initiated by grassroots citizens. What did Danny have to say?
This morning, there was a press conference with Gil McGowan, his AFL presser. He made some allegations regarding the UCP government deliberately underfunding Elections Alberta to undermine their own recall legislation. I just wanted to get your reaction to those comments that Gil made this morning.
Well, I think Gil McGowan's made it clear he's trying to overthrow our government. Like, that's the wording that he's using. And what we're hearing from the elections officials is just to be able to affirm the signatures in a single petition is 1.1 million, let alone then the second stage of running a recall election, let alone the third stage of running a by-election. So his stunt is potentially costing $5 million for every riding that he's doing it in. And we have to look at that and say, is that really what was the intention of the legislation? And the answer to that is clearly no. The intention of the legislation was to have an opportunity between elections, if there was genuine wrongdoing on the part of an MLA, to have their constituents address it, not some union boss organizing it from Edmonton. So the legislation is also very clear that this is not meant to have people being bussed in from outside the riding and money being raised on GoFundMe from who knows where. So I would say that he needs to check whether or not he's following the legislation, because from our look, it doesn't appear to be. So that's what we're seeing, is that somebody is playing around with, I think, what is a legitimate process and making a mockery of it, quite frankly.
Now, there's a lot to unpack in that little bit from Danny there. Let's see what we can do. She's got some concerns. Gil McGowan orchestrating all of this, pulling all of the strings. This big bad union boss just wasting taxpayers' money. $1.1 million to verify a recall petition and the assorted signatures. That number gets to be important in a couple minutes, by the way. But it's no small amount of money. And Gil McGowan, he's just coming in and he's wasting all this money because he wants to overthrow the government, and he's going to try to overthrow the government. We can't have him overthrowing the government. And there's some pieces here that, again, on the surface, there's some problems. I mean, again, Danny doubled down on the whole idea of, hey, if we have to make some changes to make sure that recall fits with not what we said the first time or the second time or the third time, but what we started saying after we realized that it could be used against us and make it only available to criminal situations, then yeah, because the criminal courts, those move fast. Oh, so fast. Criminal process, that'll wrap up before the next election and a recall can be initiated for sure. No problems there. But she talks about some other things. And let's go with the basic assumption. Bear with me. Let's say that Gil McGowan is, he's not, but let's say he is the source of all of these recall initiatives and all of the work that the good folks at Alberta Resistance have been doing that we've documented here at the Breakdown for like 2 years. It had nothing to do with them. It had nothing to do with them engaging people and educating them as to how the process works. No, it's all Gil McGowan in the last 20 minutes. That Gil McGowan, oh, he's so bad. If that were the case, other than $1.1 million, if somebody gets close to the right amount of signatures, because if it's not going to be that the number of signatures, the money will be less. You'll be paying people to count fewer things. If it is just a political theater exercise, it's still for 14, 16, 20 recalls cheaper than, I don't know, off-brand children's meds. It's in the support of democracy. And if he's got no support, if this thing is not grassroots, if it has no traction, nothing's going to happen. The only reason to do something, the only reason to change the legislation is because you're afraid that something will happen. And you can go, the big unions, they're so powerful, rana. If you want to, the latest rounds of bargaining would certainly suggest otherwise. But if that's the road that you choose to go, it's still only people in those constituencies that can sign the recall petition. So again, I come back to the question of what's the worst that's going to happen? We spend some money supporting democracy. I seem to recall hearing a premier just recently saying on her radio talk show that, you know what, if it costs the city of Calgary and the city of Edmonton a couple of extra tens of millions of dollars to count votes by hand because she doesn't know the difference between electronic voting and electronic tabulators, that's just the price we pay for democracy. It's the price we pay for democracy when the UCP's ass isn't on the line, but as soon as the UCP's ass is on the line, whoa, we got to be responsible with the money. It's a bad faith argument. It's bullshit. So let's just call it what it is there. And again, I want to highlight, it's only people who live in the constituency who can be the canvassers. It's only the people who live in the constituency who can sign the thing. So it's not like anybody's bussing in busloads of people because it's not a UCP AGM with a leadership vote on the line. But she talked about the GoFundMe. And this is something that there's a little bit of nuance here. And so we're going to talk about it for a quick sec. Because when we're talking about the GoFundMe, AB Resistance issued a statement. They quoted Smith. There have been some issues that have raised. Said Smith, for instance, there's a GoFundMe being used to raise money. Well, that's not allowed under the legislation. True, if the campaign has started. But collecting money for the $500 application fee is not a violation. So raising the money to put the application in, you could do that however you want. You can do a bottle drive. You could do a GoFundMe. You could busk if you're good. $500 is a lot of money for busking. You'd have to be very good. But you could busk to raise that money. However you want to raise the initial fee, there's no restrictions on that. And that's what this GoFundMe was used for. Apparently, the remainder was being donated to charity. So no big deal. But again, we see Danny jumping on that and using it as an opportunity to try to misrepresent things because that's kind of what she does. But in case you thought that I was speculating on the role that Gil and the AFL are playing in this, Gil put up some posts In them, he said, Danielle SMith is telling reporters that I'm initiating all of the recall campaigns against UCP LMLAs. This is an insult to Albertans who are actually organizing these efforts. We've decided not to initiate a single one ourselves because they're happening organically. Let me repeat that. After surveying the field, we've concluded that we don't have to initiate any recalls ourselves because Albertans entirely unaffiliated with the AFL are doing it themselves. There's a civil society earthquake underway. We will encourage our members to support those campaigns, but we are not organizing them. We don't have to. The UCP created this tsunami. They have no one to blame but themselves. By pointing the finger at us, Smith is clearly trying to create a pretext to change the recall laws to defund Elections Alberta so they don't have the resources needed to support multiple recall campaigns. No one should believe Smith's narrative or buy into her spin. Her arrogant attacks on workers' democratic rights is blowing up in her face. But let's talk about defunding recall, because that's not as crazy as you might think at all, actually. And we saw this play out a little bit earlier in the week, because there was a committee hearing, and it's the money committee. So if you need some money that's outside of the budget, then you go to the money committee and you say, "Oh, please, money committee, may I have a little bit more money for doing your good work?" And the money committee says, "Yes, you are doing fantastic work. You may have the more money." Or they say, "No," which is what they said, because Elections Alberta came to the money committee. And they said, "May we please have some money to do these recalls? Because we know for sure there's two." This is how the Angela Pitt one was announced a little prematurely. We know for sure there's two that we're going to have to do. And we got to buy some things in order to do this. We've got some devices that are coming to end of life that we weren't budgeting for because we didn't actually think this was going to happen. Boy, you guys screwed up so bad. So now we need to buy some new laptops and stuff. We would like to have $13.1 million, please. And the money committee said, we will fund each recall and each citizen-led referendum petition one at a time. Almost as if they don't have the intention of funding them all down the road as we go. That would be weird. But that's not all that the money committee decided to do, because one of the topics that came up had to do with the Auditor General, a gentleman named Doug Wiley. And he's got a pretty important job in government right now. He's held it for a few years. But a little while ago, there was this little scandal that got touched off. We called it the Skybox scandal. The NDP has more money for branding, so it's now called the Corrupt Care scandal. It's pretty wide-reaching, allegedly. There's some big questions around who knew who in the zoo and who was going to what hockey games, and were those people in positions of influence to influence decisions? Allegedly, they were. So there's a lot of questions that remain to be asked, particularly to the depth of it, because we've seen from former infrastructure minister Pete Guthrie allegations that seem to suggest that the alleged corruption potentially goes all the way up through multiple different ministries. And there's certainly been some corroborating sworn affidavits that have come out that suggest that people like Dan Williams were very, very concerned about how that might reflect his then Ministry of Mental Health and Addictions. There were some concerns about that showed up multiple times in a sworn affidavit by the former AHS CEO, Athena Menzilopoulos. And full disclosure, I show up in those affidavits as well, because allegedly the former chief of staff to the Premier of Alberta, Marshall Smith, who allegedly had Guy Felicella's article pulled, also tried to have me fired, not once but twice. So that's fun. Just another day in breakdown land. But Doug Wiley is the person who has been running that investigation. And it turns out investing widespread alleged corruption in a government, it takes a little bit of time. It takes a little bit of work. You may remember there was a judge who was supposed to have his very limited investigation done very quickly, and he needed like 6 extra months. So it's a kind of a big deal. And so Doug Wiley said, hey, I know my contract's coming up in April of next year. I would be more than willing to stay on to finish this work. I would be willing to do a 2-year extension because I think that's how long it's going to take. And he said that to the committee, and the committee said, well, no, we're going to find somebody else to finish this. We're going to pick somebody else to finish this work, which in absolutely no way struck anyone as questionable. Anyways, here's a clip of David Shepherd.
Mr. Wiley is also currently in the process of conducting an investigation into what we on our side have termed the corrupt care scandal, that being seemingly credible allegations that we had large dollar contracts given without due and proper scrutiny to supporters and friends of members of this government and their political staff. Both of those investigations are still ongoing, and Mr. Wiley is overseeing them. Mr. Wiley is also in the process of doing the initial audits for the dissolution of Alberta Health Services under this government's orders and the creation of a large number of new health entities. Again, at the direction and order of this government. All of this, Mr. Chair, is incredibly significant work. It makes no sense to remove a capable and experienced public servant, officer of this legislature, from his role in the midst of such significant work that has such significant potential impact for the people of Alberta. Incredibly essential scrutiny, daylight into dark corners, Mr. Chair, of this government's actions. It is hard. It is difficult. It is nigh on impossible, Mr. Chair, to read this motion from Mr. Cyr on behalf of his government colleagues as anything but an attempt to interfere with the work of Mr. Wiley, to divert and detour from these essential investigations, to make it more difficult for the people of Alberta to get the answers they rightfully deserve. It is shameful, Mr. Chair, that this government is effectively choosing to fire an Auditor General doing such important work on behalf of the people, who has shown his due diligence, his incredibly high principle, to choose to effectively fire him in the midst of this significant work, these significant investigations, to strike a committee where these government members will hold the majority, let's be clear, and they will have the ability to appoint the individual of their liking to take on this crucial and essential role. And let's be clear, Mr. Chair, this is a government that is well beyond having any trust from Albertans that they would not engage in some level of political interference in that process.
Okay, so maybe somebody did, in fact, say, I think there might be a cover-up here. To paraphrase a little bit what David Shepherd said. It's important to highlight, Scott Cyr came back and was like, whoa, bud, no, it's not like that. He can apply. He can apply for the job if he wants to, man. We will give him a fair shake. But this is the process we have to follow. There's no precedent for us to just extend the term of an Auditor General under extremely important, critical times. There's no precedent. I wonder if David Shepherd had an answer for that one too.
I just wanted to respond briefly to Mr. Cyr, who talked about requirements of the committee. Let's be absolutely clear. There is abundant past precedent for this committee to offer 1 or 2 year extensions to officers of the legislature, specifically when they are in a position like Mr. Wiley is in, where they have significant work they are undertaking, which requires just a little bit longer to complete. So any suggestion that this is anomalous or unusual, or that we are bound as a committee by anything, is quite contrary to the facts. The reality is, if these members wished, they could give Mr. Wiley the additional 2 years he has requested to continue the excellent work he has done and to complete these significant tasks he is doing on behalf of Albertans.
Oh, I guess they could have done it if they wanted to. They just didn't want to. So can't imagine what would be a motive for them wanting to get rid of the guy doing all of the investigations who's got his finger on the pulse of the corrupt care scandal. I can't imagine who would have a motive for that sort of thing. Moving on from there, got a couple more sections that we're going to hit on, and then we're going to get to the fun stuff because we're going to have a little bit of fun tonight. We're going to pull back the curtain, pull it back on how some of the business of being the breakdown and the some of the things that the team experience, how that works. We're going to have some fun. But let's talk about, we've got this new legislative session in effect. There's been some bills. Some of them have gotten a lot of attention. Some of them have not gotten a lot of attention. Tonight, we're going to go through all of the bills in front of the legislature. All of the ones that the one that's been passed, the two more that are coming. Big announcement tomorrow on Monday. There's some stuff that's worth talking about, because in the political climate that we're in now, where we have MLAs getting recalled left, right, and center, other ones calling their constituents motherfuckers, and the notwithstanding clause being used to take away people's charter rights and force ends to strikes and chemtrails, and there's so much going on. So let's just take a sec. What are the laws that are being created in the province of Alberta? And this is going to be a pretty cursory look, because some of them are really significant and some of them are weak sauce. We're going to go with Bill 1 to start with, and it's pretty weak sauce because basically what it is it's a bill that says that the feds have to have provincial agreement on any international treaties that they enter into that affect provinces, which the provinces already do. It's a performative bill. It is virtue signaling, I believe, is what some folks call it, to the standing up to the Laurentian elite folks. That's what that is. That already exists. So it's kind of Danny got to pontificate in the ledge. Bill number 2, everybody knows about. Certainly if you've been following the Breakdown socials for the last little while, this is the Back to School Act. This is the act that mandated that teachers had to accept the terms of the government offer. They were prohibited from engaging in any kind of strike action or discussing or organizing any kind of strike action, and that they were having their charter rights suppressed for a period of 5 years using Section 33 of the Charter, the notwithstanding clause. I'm sure everybody who follows this show knows the notwithstanding clause is the last clause of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. It exists purely to override some of what were considered to be the newer rights that were created when the charter was written and made to be given all of the powers and the things. And it's not intended to be anything other than a nuclear option. And as much as Danielle SMith and conservative pundits like to run around and be like, oh, this is exactly what Peter Lougheed would have wanted it used for, the reality is that's not the case at all. Peter Lougheed did a speech that later became a paper where he was very, very clear that in order for any government to consider using the notwithstanding clause first, they should. And he actually proposed an amendment to the charter, which would never happen because getting the charter, the Constitution amended requires a level of agreement that we'll never see in this country again. But he actually proposed an amendment where he articulated that any government who wanted to pursue these things would have to pursue it all the way through the courts, and that Section 33, the notwithstanding clause, should only be used as the last available option. It should be the option of absolute last resort. And As Danielle SMith and Demetrius Nicolaides and many other members of government have acknowledged, they had other routes that they could have gone through to try to find a deal. They had other routes that they could have used to get teachers back in school right away. There was lots of legal space for all of those things to happen. They just decided, nah, what if we didn't? What if we just were lazy with charter rights? And any attempt to frame it otherwise is disingenuous and bullshit. So that was Bill 2. Bill 3 is a little bit, it's kind of, it's good for post-secondary students. It's the Private Vocational Training Amendment Act, and it does create some student protection funds to help students recover tuition if a college closes or violates protection rules. As a former student of a institute, I went to DeVry. I'm not proud of it, but it happened. As a former DeVry student, that school got shuttered right quick. It's good to have, especially for private institutions that can kind of pop up and be like, hey, we're going to teach you how to make cheese. It's good to have protections in place for students when those organizations go belly up because they're grifting. They set some recruitment standards. They banned financial incentives tied to student enrollments for recruiters, enhanced transparency. There's really nothing that's contentious that we've been able to find around Bill 3. As always, our DMs are open, though, and we're still learning how to navigate them. So if we're missing something, please let us know. Moving on from Bill 3, we get to Bill 4. And Bill 4 is a little bit more, don't know about that. It's something of an omnibus bill, which is to say there's a bunch of different things that get dealt with in Bill 4. It at its core, its public face, it has the creation of the legislation that gives the Alberta Sheriff's Police Service officers the same collective bargaining rights and labor relations rules as other services. It expands eligibility, so permanent residents can become ASPS police officers. There's changes made to the Corrections Act to give Alberta more ability to negotiate with the transfer of prisoners. And this is where it's a little, I don't know about that. We fired this question off to a couple of lawyers. We didn't get any answers back before showtime tonight. So if there's an update, more than happy to provide it. But there's some updates to the Disclosure to Protect Against Domestic Violence Act, or Clare's Law. And we're going to throw those updates up because there's some language that's a little, don't know about that. And it has to do with powers that are being given to the minister. These are the amendments that were added in. In addition to the collection, use, and disclosure of personal information and records authorized by subsection 1, the minister may collect, use, or disclose personal information, health information, and records for the purposes of preparing and disclosing a threat assessment under section 2.1. So they've added health information into whether or not they need to make a decision about notifying somebody if somebody's considered to be a danger. And all of the rules that exist for who can do that, how they can do that, what are the circumstances, exist in a separate set of rules that are called the regulations. It's 2.1 that gets a little, I don't know about that. And this is the one that we've sent off to lawyers because there's two words that are doing potentially a lot of lifting in this section. Subject to the regulations, the minister may, in accordance with the regulations, if any, prepare a threat assessment that describes an individual's risk of perpetrating violence and provides recommendations to mitigate the risk of violence. So it's the if any part that's a little bit problematic because if you say, pursuant to the regulations, if any, if there's not, then he can access all of the private personal information, and that's just what he gets to do. He then gets to look at all of that information. The minister, we're not talking about somebody who's qualified to do a threat assessment. We're not talking about somebody who's qualified as a psychologist. We're talking about an elected official. And it's really important to highlight that. That minister then gets to look at all of that individual information and say, yes, I think that that they could be a threat. We need to notify these people to make sure that they're safe. And that's fine because the intent of Clare's Law is to make sure that if somebody has concerns that somebody in their life is being involved with somebody who has a history of domestic violence, that they're protected. There's nothing wrong with that. I want to be really, really clear about that. Notifying people who are involved with people who have a history of domestic violence is a good thing. I'm not sure that saying that the minister gets to access any information about any individual that they want, if there's any relevance to the regulations, and make the decisions from there. I'm just not sure that, if any, is the best use of the wordage there, because I'm not convinced that this doesn't mean that he can't look at whatever it wants to look at. He or she can't look at whatever they want to look at. And it's part of a expansion of giving ministers more and more insight and influence into Albertans' specific personal information, because there's no Bill 5, which is weird. I don't know what happened to Bill 5. I'm super curious what happened to Bill 5. It jumps right from Bill 4 to Bill 6. Bill 6 is the Education Prioritizing Literacy and Numeracy Amendment Act. And this one also has some bumpy parts, because it introduces mandatory screening testing for numeracy and literacy for kids in K through 3 schools. But where it gets complicated has to do with, again, the information that the minister, and again, we're talking about the minister specifically here, the minister has access to, because according to the new rules in this act, after a literacy and numeracy screening, and this is the minister, by the way, who is doing the typos in the emails and can't sign the orders correctly. After literacy and numeracy screening assessment of a child or student is conducted under Section 30-3, brackets 1, a board must ensure that the results of the literacy and numeracy screening assessment, including individualized child and student results of the literacy and numeracy screening assessment, are reported to the minister in the form and manner required by the minister. The minister shall publish on the Government of Alberta website, or in another manner the minister considers appropriate, an annual report of the results of the literacy and numeracy screening assessments reported under subsection 1. The minister may request additional information, including personal information, in addition to the individualized child and student results provided under Section 30-5, brackets 1, from boards for the purpose of overseeing the administration and operation of literacy and numeracy screening assessments under this division. And on request, the boards must provide the minister the requested information. So let's be very, very, very clear about what we're talking about in that particular piece there. That's saying that the Minister of Education gets direct access to kids, all of their personal information from grades K to 3. I don't know why. I don't know why that's not aggregate data. Because again, if the kid requires assistance, those are decisions that should be made by the appropriate people in the appropriate places, have the appropriate skill sets. They're not decisions that should be navigated or guided by a minister who can't sign papers right and writes full sentences as typos for public release. And again, everybody does dumb stuff. I do dumb stuff all the time. Ask anybody. But when the consequence of what I do, the consequence of what the show does, tends to be far less than the consequences of the actions of a minister of the crown. So maybe if you have all of these people that you're paying all of this money to, like, I don't know, press secretaries, chiefs of staffs, maybe they should be able to hold your hand when you sign the government orders. What do I know? I'm not a minister. Bill 7. Is the Water Amendment Act. And this is another one that seems to be not that bad. The nice thing about this one is that a lot of what has been requested appears to be endorsed by rural municipalities of Alberta. So there's concerns about how do we manage moving water around during droughts. this provides some powers to move some water around during droughts to make sure that people who need water get water. It also expands some authority in regards to municipalities being able to reuse water, and access water differently. So like things like rainwater, and making sure that if stuff's processed fully and properly and safe, that it can be used for all of the things. That's not bad. It's hard to take a swing on that. There are some questions though about the water licenses piece, because there's some pieces that have to do with making water licenses a little bit easier and quicker to access. And in a province where Queen Dani is all about the AI data centers, and those have huge water and power requirements, there's some questions. That brings us to the NDP bills, because those are all the ones that we talked about. All of those ones are government bills. There's 2 NDP bills that will get voted down because they're NDP bills, and because the government refuses to engage in good faith in any meaningful way. But it's nice to see that the NDP is trying to do something. And those somethings are a little bit relevant. The first one that we got to talk about is Bill 201. Bill 201 is the Employment Standards Protecting Workers' Pay Amendment Act. And basically what it is doing is it's proposing that Alberta ditches the lower minimum wage for kids and goes to a minimum wage that increases $1 per year for the next 3 years, and then is prorated to inflation. So as of December 15th, 2025, $16 per hour. It would then go up to $17 per hour September 30th, 2027. It would then go up to $18 an hour. No, I got that wrong. October 26th, it would go to $17. October 1st, 2027, it would go up to $18. And then from September 30th to 2028 on, it would be adjusted with the cost of living, which isn't a terrible idea. That's not bad. It's hard to get angry at that. But we're not done with there's also Bill 202, which I don't have a graphic for, apparently. And that is amendments to the Conflict of Interest Act, which is so desperately overdue. Honestly, read it. It's a little weak sauce. I would have swung for the fences a little bit harder, because if it's going to get voted down anyways, you might as well take a stance that's strong. And it says, instead of right now, you can change the limits for how much gifts, especially staffers, can get through regulations. It sets those in legislation, which is not bad, because it turns out staffers allegedly have been getting a lot of gifts that haven't been declared, because we know that Dani got gifted hockey tickets from the person that she hired to the Invest Alberta board. She was gifted a bunch of those, and her chief of staff at the time, Marshall Smith, went, and her bestie, Rebecca Pollack, who's her communications principal secretary, also went, and neither of them disclosed those gifts, despite the fact that those tickets certainly would have been worth more than $500 at a playoff hockey game, allegedly. So going back to why the Auditor General's report is so important. But there's more coming, and it's the more coming that we gotta take a sec to talk about, because Dan Williams kind of announced them a little while ago, but he only kind of announced them.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on behalf of Government House Leader to give notice pursuant to Government Motion 4 that there will be no evening sittings today. Evening sitting today, Wednesday, November 5th, 2025. And I also give oral notice of Bill 8, Utility Statutes Amendment Act 2025, sponsored by the Minister of Affordability and Utilities, and Bill 9, Protecting Alberta's Children Status Amendment Act 2025, sponsored by the Minister of Justice.
Honourable Deputy Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, during notice of motion, it seems that I may have stuttered during the word statutes, and I'm asking to correct the record when I read notice of motion introducing Bill 9, or oral notice for Bill 9. Pardon me. clarity, Bill 9. Yep.
And then to make sure that the record is clear this time around.
So in question, I also rise to give oral notice of Bill 8, Utility Statutes Amendment Act 2025, sponsored by the Minister of Affordability and Utilities, and Bill 9, Protecting Alberta's Children Statutes Amendment Act 2025, sponsored by the Minister of Justice.
Honourable Opposition House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, apologies if a point of order is not the appropriate mechanism, but I'm curious, we have not reverted to notices of motion. What is happening at this moment, and is it in order?
Okay. So, Honourable Deputy Government House Leader, you need to ask for unanimous consent to revert to the previous section.
Mr. Speaker, I believe it was a stutter, but if that is what the dais is requesting, I'll ask for unanimous consent to the House so that the stutter can be clarified and say statutes.
It's supposed to be what the standing orders require more than what the dais is requesting.
What's your interpretation, Chair?
It is what the standing orders say, not what the dais is requesting. I think that probably answers the opposition House Leader's inquiry, which was not a point of order, as she rightly pointed out, but nonetheless it was a legitimate inquiry, so that kind of answers your question. So what's before us now is a unanimous consent to go back to notices of motion. Does anyone object to going back to notices of motion? No, consent has not been granted.
So that was when Dan Williams tried to introduce the Protecting Alberta's Children Amendment Act, sponsored by the Minister of Justice, Mickey Amery. He stuttered. I don't think he stuttered. We'll get to that in a sec. But I played the full clip because it's a fascinating look into how I love how Danny Boy there decided that he was going to chirp Rick McIver. I thought that was pretty stonesy. And it was fascinating to see Rick McIver be like, no, these are the rules that you guys wrote. He's one of them guys, but the House Leader gets to write the rules for how things have to proceed to some degree. And they wrote rules saying that if you want to go back and fix a mistake, that you need unanimous consent from the House. And they did not have that unanimous consent. So they didn't get to introduce the bill, which bought vulnerable kids, unfortunately, only a week. But I love the fact that Dan there tries to say that he stuttered, because if you go back and listen to the very beginning, it's very clear that he did not say statutes. He said stat us. It's almost as if he slurred the words. I can't imagine how this guy might end up slurring his words inside of the legislature. It escapes me. I can think of no possible explanations as to how this guy right here could potentially have problems formulating words correctly. It's not like he has a history of that. Mr. Conscious writes. That's a throwback to his very, very, very early days in the legislature. You can search for that on our timeline if you like. But what he's talking about there is this new act that everybody knows is coming, and it's generously titled, misleadingly titled, the Protecting Alberta's Children Amendment Act. And this has to do with three major pieces of legislation, 26, 27, 29, I think, that the UCP introduced, punching down on the rights of trans youth in the province of Alberta. There's a bunch of different pieces to it. The first one has to do with parental notification. So if a kid goes to school and says, I would like to try using these pronouns, or I would like to try to use this name, please, it requires now parental notification. The teachers have to out that kid. And when you're talking about vulnerable youth some trans kids have wonderful homes, and I don't want to diminish that. They have parents who want to show up and make sure that their kids are healthy and happy, and everything else is a bonus. But there are some parents who believe erroneously that gender is purely binary, and that if you don't fall in line with their expectations, that there's something fundamentally wrong with you. And there's folks that weaponize religion, there's folks that weaponize culture, and this demographic is disproportionately at risk of all of the very, very, very bad things. And I've made the argument many times on the show before that if your kid isn't comfortable talking to you about those issues, then you should be grateful that they have an environment that they feel safe in, and maybe do some examination as to why your kid doesn't feel safe with you, their parent. Maybe that's where the emphasis on this conversation should be had. But that's not where the UCP is putting the emphasis. That's where they're saying we're going to make it legally required for these kids to be outed. It also includes the fairness in sport legislation that says that any person who is identified as female at birth after the age of 12, they have to be able to prove after the age of 12 that they're female. We don't want any of those trans girls showing up in any of those sports. And this is a bonkers one, especially because it's any sports at any age after 12. If you're 65 years old and you want to do some lawn bowling, if it is a women's lawn bowling league or a women's darts league or whatever, somebody who is trans is not allowed to participate in those sports. It doesn't work the same way if you're a trans man, though. So if you're a trans man, you're allowed to compete in men's sports. So no hypocrisy whatsoever, no inconsistency of rules at all. Hashtag sarcasm. And then there is the mandated lack of medical treatment for trans youth, or the medical terminology, the term is people who are navigating gender dysphoria. It is a medical condition. It is a recognized medical condition that can be driven by a great number of factors, including genetics. And this is all entirely provable. There are a number of different ways of providing gender affirming care. One of them is through puberty blockers. Puberty blockers effectively press pause on puberty, and as soon as you get off of them, puberty restarts. Puberty blockers are incredibly valuable because, in effect, what they do is they make it so all of the changes that a person experiences in puberty don't happen. It buys time. And that gets to be really, really important, because for trans youth who are wanting to be able to present as their gender, not their biologically born dictated gender, those changes are very, very hard to undo. Requires much more surgery. Some of them are just unavoidable. So having puberty blockers to give trans youth, under medical supervision, under psychiatric supervision, the ability to navigate that process and figure out what they want to do, how they want to handle it, is perfectly reasonable. It is a recognized treatment regimen, and it is one that the UCP government has said will no longer be available in the province of Alberta. They've also said that puberty blockers, hormone replacement therapy will no longer be available until you're considerably older. That's what they've done. And this has gone to court. And this is the absolute bonkers part of this whole conversation, because you can have academic arguments over the sports piece. There's evidence that you can find if you really want to, but there aren't any court rulings on the sports piece in Alberta. There were challenges that were coming. This was going to be battled out in the courts. It looks like it's not going to be able to be battled out in the courts anymore, because despite Dani's initial assurances that she wouldn't pull the trigger on the notwithstanding clause, that she would allow the court process to work, as we saw with the recall legislation, it turns out when Dani's on the losing side, well, then she'll go ahead and just rewrite the laws for her convenience. And it's very, very clear that on the gender affirming care, the medical treatment, that Dani has no experience, no training, no ability to even begin to weigh in on the conversation in an intelligent or informed way. She's losing on that front, because there has been an injunction that has been put forward by a judge here in Alberta at the request of a number of different families that were affected by these new legislative changes. And I'm going to read part of it right now. In conclusion, I find the professional standards of Alberta healthcare professions will protect the public interest while an interlocutory injunction is in effect. I agree with the applicants that in this case, the status quo protects the public interest through a web of public law and private law constraints on the provision of gender-affirming care, which the injunction would fully leave in place. I am satisfied the balance of convenience favors the granting of an injunction. I am satisfied in respect of the grounds raised under sections 7 and 15 of the Charter that there are serious issues to be tried, that irreparable harm will be caused if the ban comes into force, and the balance of convenience weighs in favor of granting the injunction. So let's be very, very clear here. A judge has already looked at the available evidence, the testimony of experts, and said, if this legislation is allowed to come into force, it will cause irreparable harm. There are charter violations that need to be resolved in the courts. What the judge is saying with this injunction is that I don't know what the answers are on the charter stuffs. That needs to be tried in court, but it needs to be tried in court. This should go all of the way so that people know whether or not these laws violate charter rights. And by all accounts, sometime this week, if not tomorrow, Danielle SMith and the UCP are going to use the notwithstanding clause to push through all of the suppression of all of the charter rights on all of the things that I just talked about. And if that doesn't get people fired up for recall, I don't know what possibly could. It is horrifying that we live in a province where that's a very real possibility. And it's one of the issues that I would make the cautious argument that because the UCP decided that they were going to first use the notwithstanding clause on teachers, they've already proven the point. We had Chantal DeJong stand up in the legislature a couple of days back, and she talked about how inappropriate it was that people would say, invoke the poem, first they came for. And if you know the history of that poem, it's a pretty tone-deaf thing to complain about, because the guy who delivered the speech that later became that poem was a Nazi. He was a collaborator with the Nazis. And he realized after how wrong he was. He realized after, when you're in a position of power, how easy it is to buy into the thing that you're trying to propagate, and how much evil can actually happen when you're part of that process. It's a lesson that many UCP MLAs and ministers would probably do well to dwell on a little bit longer, because the history does run very, very deep. But the UCP went for the teachers first. They got the order wrong. You're supposed to start with the most marginalized first, because that way you can get away with more. But if you go with a really big demographic first, then people pay attention. And hopefully people will start to pay attention that this UCP government, this UCP party, is not the party of law and order. They are not the party of the Constitution and the Charter. They are not the party of freedom of speech or freedom of expression or personal rights. They are the party of, we're going to do what we want. And if anybody gets in our way, we're going to use every hammer that we have at our disposal to make sure that we can do what we want. And anybody who thinks that they're immune to somebody who has that kind of mindset needs to absolutely give their head a shake. And this is one of the areas where I'm personally hoping that the other political parties in the province of Alberta start to get their shit together. Because more often than not, it's looking a lot like what's happening in the United States with the Democrats and the Republicans is being mirrored in real time in Alberta with the UCP and everybody else. we did start to see a little bit of the change in the communication strategy from the NDP this week, though. I'm going to have some fun with this one. We got to see a little bit of a change. Naheed Nenshi, leader of the NDP, released a new video to some platforms. Not all of them. A lot of them were just using the YouTube link. And this hurts me because social media basics 101, guys. Any social media platform doesn't want to drive their viewers and their advertising revenue to other social media platforms. If you want something to get traction on Instagram, you have to post it on Instagram. If you want something to get traction on YouTube, you have to post it on YouTube. If you want something to get traction on Twitter, you have to post it on Twitter. You got to cross-post all of this stuff. You can't just post a link to YouTube and hope for the best, and that's probably why the YouTube video is not performing as well as you might have potentially hoped that it would have. Because the algorithms throttle it to say, oh no, we don't want you going to YouTube. You'll fall down a YouTube rabbit hole and you'll end up buying strange things and listening to Jordan Peterson. And we'd very much like you to listen to Jordan Peterson over here, please. So we would, because we make the advertising dollars. So good effort, but the video is not bad. It's kind of reminiscent of the video that we saw when Naheed Nenshi launched his leadership campaign. It's a bit of a reintroduction, though. It kind of rehashes some familiar ground. The feedback has been, let's say, mixed. It's very flashy. It's very well produced. I wish we had access to that kind of production here, but we do not. But it's a very, very, very flashy video. And in it, one of the things that Naheed Nenshi talks about is the idea of what Albertans deserve, and the type of behavior that Albertans deserve. And we talked a little bit earlier about the Conflict of Interest Act and the idea that elected officials and the people who work for them directly as, I don't know, staff, perhaps they should hold themselves to a slightly higher standard. This is a norm that existed for many years. It was an expectation. If you talk to anybody who's been in government or politics for any length of time prior to the last Donald Trump, there was an expectation that how you conducted yourself in the public arena mattered. It was a reflection on the government. Those days are gone. Which brings us to a new segment of the last two that we have left. This is going to go for 2 hours again. I can't believe this. A new segment, a one-off, a special segment. A look behind the curtains at the breakdown that we're calling Here for a Good Time, Not a Long Time. And that joke is funny because the Minister of Infrastructure is a gentleman named Martin Long, and he's got some staff. He's got himself some staff. He's got himself a chief of staff. He does. This gentleman right here, his Twitter handle, and this gets to be important later, is at Syed Ahmed. And Saeed's run in a couple of elections. Nothing wrong with that. He's never won an election. Nothing wrong with that. I've run in a couple of elections. I've never won an election. So I don't know that punching down on somebody because of their electoral history is necessarily the win in this equation. I think there's other ways to get some wins. And the whole reason why we talk about Naheed Nenshi's video and then we talk about Syed's video, or Syed, is because, or sorry, I want to make sure I get this right. Syed Ahmed, YEG. Yeg, for Edmonton. The whole reason why we got to talk about him is Syed had some thoughts about Naheed's video. And let's be clear before we get into this. Anybody who has been following the breakdown for any length of time knows that we are equal opportunity. If anybody is doing badly, they will say, we will say, you're not doing very well. We would like you to do better for the people of Alberta. It has nothing to do with partisan loyalty, and I'm certain there are people in the NDP who would say, "Oh God, those guys again." So do with that what you will. But Saeed had some thoughts on the Nenshi video, because it turns out that slick production came from the same production house that was heavily instrumental in getting the new mayor of New York elected. They were trying to capitalize on some of that big energy there. So Saeed threw up a post, as you do. Unbelievable, all caps. Naheed Nenshi just hired an American, all caps, ad agency for his image makeover, spending our Canadian dollars in the US. What happened to elbows up by Canadian pure hypocrisy? If the Conservatives did this, the media would explode. Absolute double standards. Now, there's some things that we need to unpack there. I'm yelling because it's in all caps, and that gets to be relevant later. But there's a few things to unpack here. First of all, there's nothing to suggest that any taxpayers' money went towards the creation of these videos. These videos were produced by the NDP. So more than anything, the donation money for people who donate to the NDP went towards it, but that's not taxpayers' money in the same way. So there's a little bit of conflation that's going on here. And also, when we talk about what happened to Elbows Up by Canadian pure hypocrisy, we have to take a little bit of a look at the track record on the social media platform that we're talking about, which is the Twitter machine of Naheed Nenshi. And it turns out he hasn't really been all that elbows up. There's a couple of tweets that he posted back in April and May, one in June, but there's only one time that we could find with a detailed, thorough search of his Twitter account where he actually used the phrase elbows up, and that was from May. This is not the time for victory lap. We must focus on what lies ahead, fortifying the Canadian economy, protecting workers and industries, and recruiting the best and brightest to Alberta. Keep those elbows up. We've got work to do. But that is almost, at this point, 6 months, 7 months ago. Elbows up has not been a mantra of Naheed Nenshi in any way. And if we take a look at the same time period, on May 3rd, a day after the U.S. administration unveiled its new tariff policy, I had a productive meeting with the U.S. Consul General, Emily Fleckner. We discussed the importance of Alberta to the United States. So let's be clear. Naheed Nenshi has not taken the Mark Carney elbows up, we're going to go all in, buy only Canadian. That hasn't been his line. He's been trying to some degree, shadow, less so with the Mar-a-Lago trips, that we know of. I don't think he's gone to Mar-a-Lago. But he's been trying to shadow that, well, let's see if we can negotiate our way out of this. Let's see if we can find a collaborative solution that works for everybody. And he has not been a huge advocate of the elbows up. Now, when a chief of staff says something that seems kind of hypocritical, that's kind of what we do. That's kind of our jam. And so we jammed. And we put up a little tweet that said, didn't have the UCP chief of staff to the Ministry of Infrastructure arguing for embargoing the U.S., but here we are. And then alluding to what's coming in just a few more minutes. Anyway, save this tweet for Sunday night, and then we have a little screenshot of his LinkedIn. And he thought that now it's on. Now we're going to have ourselves a good old fashioned Twitter fight. Because he came back and he found my personal LinkedIn account, which is public. I don't care. I don't put anything on there that I would have any concerns with. But he overestimated the effort that it takes us here at The Breakdown to put up a snarky tweet. I must have hit a massive nerve today at The Breakdown by Nate Pike. And again, to be clear, it's not just me. Is trying to troll me like a toddler throwing a tantrum. And this is where he gets a little gross. Just a few days ago, he was spinning excuses for Supreme Court decision on pedophilia and defending the most heinous criminals. I absolutely was not. We'll do that on another day. Only a morally empty individual would stoop that low. To be clear, I was arguing for higher maximum sentences. Clearly, Nate has UCP derangement syndrome. Hey, Nate, keep it up, and you might just win Nenshi's NDP medal for most delusional. I don't get invited to award shows. And to riff on one of my favorite humorists of all time, I wouldn't want to be a member of any club that would have me. So I'm not super concerned about that because I've made jokes about everybody. But it didn't stop there because now we're having a Twitter war. So let's go all in because we're a satirical, acerbic commentary podcast, not the chief of staff to a minister of the crown. Cool tweet, bro. You should really be proud. Managed to completely misrepresent what was actually said and then launched into ad hominem attacks. Very cancel culture of you. Anyways, here's another tweet of yours, no reason. And we pulled up a tweet of his from July of this year where he said, we live in a world where cancel culture controls everything and the population are either too sensitive or too cautious to have a public conversation on anything. That is a recipe for disaster. If you disagree this, then dare to tell me why. He didn't like that very much. He replied, hey, buddy, it's pretty rich to see you attack others and then label them as cancel culture when they stand up for themselves. Now, again, to be clear, we did not attack. We simply said, it's a funny thing that he's arguing for embargoes of the United States when he's a UCP chief of staff, which is obviously a little glib because that's what we do here. But he wanted us to hold up a mirror. Sounds like what a delusional medal contender in quotes. I don't know what that is. I want this medal now. I would like to get one of the delusional medal contender medals. Would do. Bud? Got it. Your double standards are hard to miss. And it is so hard to respect, all caps, someone who cannot own their actions. Just a thought, a mirror can be a powerful tool for self-awareness. Maybe give it a try, bro. See, so what happened there is we used the bro thing, so he fired the bro thing back because we're having fun on Twitter now, right? Well, it took a bit of a turn. It did. It got a little complicated because later in the evening, as things were not going particularly well for Sade, oh, wow. Look who's got some strong words for you, Nate, at the Breakdown AB. Quote, he is a racist and misogynist online disinformation spreader guy who thinks he knows it all, end quote. And oh, look at that. You blocked her. Truth hurts for sure. And then a screenshot of Shelley Jones, Madame Shelley Joe. Can you believe this? The Breakdown just blocked me for calling them out. He's a racist and misogynist online disinformation spreader guy who thinks he knows it all. Wow. So who is Shelley? Well, she's a heavy hitter on the Twitter machines. She follows 37 accounts and she has, brace yourselves, 0 followers. But that's not where it gets really interesting because this morning, Saeed doubled down again and he didn't really think it through, unfortunately. Wow, just wow. So we're doing the wow, just wow a lot. There seems to be repetition in the language that's being used in the Shelley Jones tweets and in the Syed Ahmed tweets. Wow, just wow. No wonder all of your comments are nothing but a chorus of kumbaya, kumbaya. I see what you're doing. First, you block anyone unknown who dares to challenge your narrative, and then you play the victim to silence them. It's a low blow that only reveals your true colors. Hey, keep perfecting your spin doctor persona. It's some kind of twisted art form, but for sure it wins you some shiny accolades from your NDP trolls. Again, I want to know when I get my medal. Just a little nugget of African wisdom for you in case you have some humility left in you. The louder, all caps, you shout, all caps, the quicker you lose your voice, all caps. Hope you digest that. To which the Breakdown replied, you would know that you wrote a tweet about not shouting in all caps with an exclamation mark, right? But where have we seen that all caps stuff before? And before I show you, I want to be clear. Shelley Jones said that she asked the Breakdown a question, and we went through thoroughly and tried to find any places where Shelley Jones had asked us a question. We could not find any places where Shelley Jones asked us any questions. In fact, in all of this silliness, this exchange with the chief of staff for a minister of the crown, the only person who asked us the question anywhere in here was Ahmed. Some people might just say, wow, just wow. But is there anybody else who throws out racist tropes and does so in all caps? The coincidences, they're just so everywhere. Anyways, There are many that believe that those who choose to serve in government should hold themselves to a higher standard, and should be cognizant of how it reflects on people. There might be some that argue the people of Alberta have a right to public service, which is conducted with impartiality and integrity. It is this special obligation to Albertans that demands what those expectations are. And that's very important. And it's for that reason those words are special words. They're actually from the Code of Conduct for elected officials. And those are really important words, because all too often nowadays we're seeing, the Code of Conduct for elected officials and their staff. And all too often these days we're seeing political staffers engaging in bad faith arguments and not being very reflective of the type of government that probably Albertans want them to be. And that's why we decided to make it really, really easy for Saeed to find this information in the future. So all you have to do, Saeed, if you want to read what the bare minimum expectations are for somebody who's in the public service, who's employed with the government of Alberta, all you have to do now is go to www.saeedahmedYEG.ca, and it'll take you right to that document every single time. But I don't want to belabor the point about the wasting of money, because taxpayers should be able to hold people who are spending taxpayers' money responsible. They should be able to hold them to account. That's entirely reasonable. And so that's why every episode for the next few weeks, I mean, we're going to still end with the clip that we always do, but we got a little special something, a little extra we're going to throw into the mix. You might remember a few weeks back, we did a bit of a deep dive on the good folks over at Invest Alberta. They had their corporate retreat and spent tens of thousands, some people would say hundreds of thousands of dollars, living their very, very best lives at the Fairmont. They did very, very well for themselves there. We're gonna spend a couple minutes taking a look at what are some of the other things that Invest Alberta is spending their money on. Oh, wait, it's not their money. It's taxpayers' money. I wonder if Saeed will be as outraged over this as he was over the Head Nenshi video that wasn't using taxpayers' money. Because tonight we're going to talk about the very, very nice trip that Rick Christians, the Chief Executive Officer for Invest Alberta, made to London and then Vienna. The airfare, it was not cheap. The travel visa, $18.76. That's not bad. You could do worse. Where it gets really interesting for Invest Alberta, as they're spending taxpayer dollars for 2 breakfasts, 2 lunches, and 2 dinners, Mr. Christians spent $483.73 and was not apparently required to justify those expenditures with receipts, because receipts are not required for per diems or allowances. There were also $29.30 of incidentals. He then went from May 6th to 10th to Vienna. And while he was in Vienna, he had a working meeting dinner, $204.72 of taxpayers' dollars. That was with 2 attendees. Investor meeting, $40.82 with 2 attendees. How much did he spend on meals? 4 breakfasts, 4 lunches, 3 dinners. $967.04. And Albertans do not get to see the receipts for how that $1,000 of meals for 4 days was spent. Where's the outrage now? It's almost as if there's a boatload of other receipts that we're going to have an absolute blast sorting through over the next weeks, months, because there's just so many. So we're going to make a bit of a meal out of it, if you will. That brings us to just about the conclusion of the show. Got a couple of different things that we want to talk about real quick before we go, and then we got one last very special treat for the regulars who hang out in the chat. You'll know what I'm talking about in just a sec. But before we do that, I got to do the housekeeping things and stuffs. So with all of that being said, if you appreciate the kind of content that we're trying to produce here at The Breakdown, we would love nothing more than if you signed up to be one of our Patreon sponsors at www.patreon. That was a stutter. www.patreon.com/thebreakdownab. You can set your own rate, and every little bit that you provide helps us to put the show together and do all of the silly things that we like to do. So you can do that over at the Patreon. If you're not somebody who wants to do the regular commitment thing, then you can also send e-transfers to info@thebreakdownab.ca. I suspect I'll be getting some emails from, I don't know, a certain chief of staff at that address in no short order. And we do also have the merch stuffs. We've partnered with the wonderful folks at Oddities, and we have a full line of all of the merch things now. You can get the hoodies. They're very nice. I have one of them, and they're delightful. The t-shirts, and now that the Canada Post Strike is out, we're going to be sending out some to our the guests that we had up in our Edmonton show. The shipping that you get as a customer, it turns out, is much faster than the shipping that you get when I'm trying to send you a gift, because I'm bad at those things. So you can get all of that at merch@thebreakdownab.ca. And I think that's just about everything that we've got for tonight, except for one more thing. One little tiny thing. And this is a little bit of a side quest. But many of you who follow the show, any of you who are at our Edmonton show, know that the lives in our house are not normal lives by any stretch of the imagination. And we have some eccentric pets. If you follow my Twitter feed, you know we just got a delightful new puppy. She's fantastic and has all of the beans. But we have had some other pets for quite some time before then. And there have been repeated requests in the chat section to meet one of our other little pets. And this lovely lady right here, they are real. We're not kidding when we say we have chickens. This is Kitty. And she's very excited to be on the show. This is Kitty, and she's one of the most delightful little birds that you ever meet. And if you think that you're going to be clever with like, oh, she looks delicious, whatever. We've had chickens as pets for a better part of a decade. Nothing you say is going to be new or original or phase us. So if you want to waste your time, go ahead. Makes no difference to me. But for everybody who has been asking in the chat, I do read the chat. And we all read the chat. And you know that my wife, Nikki's in there quite regularly. They've been saying, prove it, show us the bird. She came to the Calgary show. She's here for everybody now. This is such a weird show we're doing tonight. I'm going to hand her back so that I can do everybody's. She loves the studio, apparently. Got to play one more clip before we call it a night.
How's your BS detector evolved over time?
I tend to be pretty trusting.
Still, same effect. I don't know how that works. Every single time. It just gives me joy. It gives me joy. Thank you so much to everybody who tuned in tonight. Please, I beg of you, the show that we're dropping on Wednesday, it is so important. Please watch that show, because there's some spectacularly brave young folks who showed up for that conversation. That's all I'm going to say about it for now. But please tune in for that show, or make sure that you catch it after the fact, because it's so important, especially given with what we're going to see this week. I want to thank everybody who tuned in watching live tonight. Thank you so much. If you're listening to the audio version of the podcast, do the reviews and the stars and the things on your favorite platform. Subscribe on the Spotify or the iTunes or whatever it is that you like. And if you're watching on the YouTubes, like, subscribe, share it with all your friends, and make sure you tag, say in the shares that you do, so he can know. It's that much easier to now find the code of conduct for government staffers. That's what we do here. Thank you all so much. Take care of each other. Keep the conversation going.